History has a sense of humor, a dark, chaotic, and occasionally stupid sense of humor. What you're about to see are 33 real moments when humanity completely outdid itself, not with brilliance, but with pure absurdity. Armies humiliated by birds, navies traded for soda, dead men winning horse races. These aren't myths or jokes. They're all 100% true. Proof that the story of humanity is less of a triumph and more of an ongoing comedy. 1. In 1989, the Soviet Union was basically a giant garage sale, and they were desperate for a taste of Western delight, specifically Pepsi. The only issue was their currency, the ruble, was worth less than the paper it was printed on. So, in a masterstroke of bartering that can only happen when a superpower is on its last legs, they traded what they had: a whole damn navy. Pepsi handed over some sugary syrup, and in return got a cruiser, a frigate, a destroyer, and 17 submarines. For a glorious, hilarious moment, a soda company had the 6th largest military fleet on Earth. The board meetings must have been insane. Johnson, how are third quarter profits? Up 4%, sir, and we've successfully blockaded a rival shipment of Coke in the Baltic. They immediately sold the entire fleet to a Swedish scrapyard, officially making it the most epic coupon deal in history. 2. Speaking of military genius, let's fly to Australia in 1932. The country faced a terrifying invasion. 20,000 emus were running wild, destroying crops. So the Australian government did the most rational thing they could think of. They declared war on the birds. They deployed the Royal Australian Artillery armed with machine guns to commit avian genocide. But the emus, apparently trained by Sun Tzu himself, used advanced guerrilla tactics. They'd split into small, fast-moving groups, making them impossible targets. The soldiers looked like cartoon characters, firing wildly into the bush while the emus zigzagged away untouched. After a week of total humiliation and wasting thousands of bullets, the army officially retreated. They lost to birds. Australia, a continent literally designed to kill humans, was defeated by its own overgrown, feathered velociraptors. 3. You think winning takes skill and being, alive? Tell that to Frank Hayes. In 1923, this jockey was a professional loser, having never won a single race. He gets a long-shot ride on a horse named Sweet Kiss, and halfway through the race, his heart just gives up. He has a massive, fatal heart attack and dies instantly. But his body, in a final act of sheer stubbornness, stays perfectly perched in the saddle. The horse, completely clueless that its pilot has just left the building, barrels across the finish line in first place. Frank Hayes won the race while dead. The track officials had to formally confirm that a dead guy was the winner, which must have been an interesting conversation. The horse was so freaked out by the incident that it was nicknamed the Sweet Kiss of Death and never raced again. I mean, would you? 4. In 1962, Tanzania, a plague broke out. Not the flu, not smallpox, but a laughter epidemic. It started with 3 schoolgirls giggling and just not stopping. This wasn't joyful laughter. It was a painful, exhausting, uncontrollable spasm. It ripped through their school, infecting 95 students and forcing it to close. But the plague went on tour. The kids went home and spread it to their villages. It ultimately affected over 1,000 people for 18 agonizing months. Imagine the horror. You can't work, you can't sleep, you can't think, because you're trapped in a non-stop, agonizing laugh track from hell. It's like a Joker plot, but instead of chaos in Gotham, it just created really awkward family dinners in Africa. 5. There are con artists, and then there's Victor Lustig, the undisputed heavyweight champion of audacity. In 1925, he decided to sell the Eiffel Tower. Posing as a government official, he invited Paris's top scrap metal dealers to a secret hotel meeting, spun a story about the tower being too expensive to maintain, and convinced them it was being sold for scrap. He was so smooth, one guy even paid him a massive bribe to seal the deal. Lustig took the money and fled. But here's where it gets God tier. He got bored, came back to Paris a month later, and tried the exact same scam on a different group of dealers. The sheer, glorious nerve of it is breathtaking. He wasn't just selling a landmark. He was selling a level of confidence that modern science has yet to replicate. 6. During World War II, the Polish army had a secret weapon that could drink beer, smoke cigarettes, and carry 100 pounds of explosives, a bear named Wojtek. Adopted as a cub by the troops, he became one of the guys. To get him on a British transport ship, they didn't hide him. They officially enlisted him. He became Private Wojtek with a rank, paybook, and serial number. This bear was a combat veteran. During the brutal Battle of Monte Cassino, he voluntarily carried heavy crates of artillery shells, literally helping his buddies fight the war. Imagine being an enemy soldier, peeking over a ridge and seeing a 500-pound bear hauling ammo boxes. You'd just lay down your weapon and reconsider all your life choices right there. 7. In 1696, the English government was broke and had a brilliant idea: the window tax. They would tax houses based on how many windows they had. It was a tax on seeing outside. The public responded by collectively saying, "Nope," and started bricking up their windows. Entire city blocks turned into grim, depressing monoliths with no light or fresh air. This, predictably, turned homes into perfect petri dishes for diseases like cholera and typhus. For 150 years, the government essentially made its own people sick and miserable in the name of collecting a few extra coins. It's a powerful reminder that any idea that starts with "let's tax sunlight" is probably a bad one. 8. The 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis was less of an athletic event and more of a human science experiment gone horribly wrong. It was held in 90-degree heat on roads that were basically clouds of dust. The guy who finished first was disqualified because he'd gotten tired and hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles. The actual winner, Thomas Hicks, was hallucinating and had to be carried across the finish line after his trainers gave him a helpful cocktail of brandy and literal rat poison. Another runner was chased a mile off course by wild dogs. A Cuban postman running the race just decided to take a nap and eat some rotten apples, which gave him food poisoning. It was a complete clown show, a perfect storm of incompetence and suffering that makes you wonder if the prize was a gold medal or just survival. 9. Picture this. You're a British official in colonial India, and you have a snake problem. A big one. Cobras everywhere. So you announce a simple, genius plan: a cash bounty for every dead cobra. For a week, you're a hero. People are bringing in dead snakes. You're handing out cash. Problem solved. But then you notice the snakes all look suspiciously fresh. That's because some local hustlers started thinking like entrepreneurs. They realized it was easier to make cobras than to find them. They were literally farming deadly snakes in their backyards, breeding them. When the government finally figured out they were running a cobra-based pyramid scheme and shut it down, the farmers did what any sensible businessman would do. They liquidated their assets. They released tens of thousands of angry, unemployed cobras into the city. The problem went from bad to biblical plague overnight. 10. Back in the 1930s, before people did stupid things for TikTok clout, they did stupid things for the sheer hell of it. Enter the goldfish swallowing craze. It started when one Harvard student, probably named Chad, swallowed a live goldfish on a bet. The story spread like wildfire, and suddenly every college bro from coast to coast was chugging down live fish like they were shots of tequila. This became an actual competitive sport. Students would announce their official goldfish counts to the local papers. One guy at MIT, because of course it was MIT, even built a contraption with tubes and levers to swallow them more efficiently. Imagine your grandpa telling you stories about his college days. We didn't have video games, we just ate the pets. It was a simpler, dumber time. 11. It's 1989. The US military has cornered Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega in the Vatican embassy. A delicate situation. Do they start a diplomatic incident? Do they storm the building? Nope. They deploy the ultimate weapon of psychological warfare: a dad's rock playlist. For 10 straight days, they blasted the embassy with gigantic speakers, playing a non-stop loop of Guns N' Roses, The Clash, and Van Halen at volumes that could peel paint. It was called Operation Nifty Package, and its goal was to literally annoy a dictator into surrendering. And it worked. Noriega, a devoted opera lover, couldn't take any more "Welcome to the Jungle" and finally gave up. It was a historic military victory achieved through the sheer, weaponized power of terrible taste. 12. Kentucky, 1876. A woman is outside making soap when, without warning, it starts raining meat. Fresh meat. Chunks of it falling from a clear blue sky. This wasn't a freak weather event. This was a meat shower. The whole town was baffled. Two guys, in an act of legendary scientific bravery, actually tasted it and said it was either lamb or deer. The leading theory today is that a huge flock of vultures, also called buzzards, had a big lunch, flew over the farm, and then all got food poisoning at the exact same time. It was a synchronized mid-air projectile vomit storm. So the next time you're worried about a little rain, just be thankful it's not raining pre-digested deer chunks from a flock of flying garbage disposals. 13. Most armies practice shooting at targets. The Austrian army, in 1788, decided to practice shooting at themselves. During a campaign against the Ottoman Empire, a group of Austrian soldiers got drunk on schnapps and started a fight. In the darkness and confusion, someone fired a shot. Then someone, probably the drunkest guy there, yelled, "The Turks! The Turks!" The entire 100,000-man army woke up and collectively lost its mind. Cavalry charged infantry, different regiments started blasting each other with cannons, and for one chaotic night, the Austrian army fought a brutal, full-scale battle against itself. When the actual Ottoman army showed up 2 days later, they found 10,000 dead or wounded Austrians and a very confused campsite. They basically won the battle by being late to the party. 14. The first Battle of Bull Run was meant to be the Super Bowl of the Civil War. The Union was supposed to crush the Confederates in one glorious afternoon. It was considered such a slam dunk that the high society of Washington, D.C. packed their carriages with champagne and picnic baskets and trotted out to watch. They sat on a hill, ready to sip wine and watch the fireworks. But then the battle turned into a bloody, chaotic disaster, and the Union Army started running for their lives. The problem? The road back to D.C. was now completely clogged with panicked picnickers trying to save their cucumber sandwiches. It was an instant traffic jam from hell, a mix of terrified soldiers and angry, wine-drunk aristocrats. It was the moment America learned that war is not, in fact, a spectator sport. 15. When Tsar Peter the Great decided to modernize Russia, he started with the most important issue: facial hair. He looked at the long, magnificent beards of his noblemen and saw the past, and he hated it. So he introduced the beard tax. Want to keep that glorious face mane? Pay up. He even issued little metal beard tokens as a receipt, like a coat check for your chin. If you were caught with an untaxed beard, the guards would hold you down and shave you right there on the spot, probably with a rusty farming tool. It was a state-sponsored war on looking like a wizard. Peter the Great didn't just build a new capital. He tried to build a new nation, one clean-shaven face at a time. 16. In the 1690s, the nation of Scotland collectively decided to have a midlife crisis. They wanted to be a cool, rich colonial empire like England. So they took almost every penny they had, nearly a quarter of the entire country's liquid wealth, and invested it in a single project, a colony in Panama called the Darien Scheme. They were going to build a trading hub and get fabulously rich. The only slight issue was that the location was a disease-infested, alligator-filled, uninhabitable swamp. The colony failed so spectacularly, it's almost impressive. Thousands died, the ships rotted, and all the money vanished. Scotland was so completely and utterly bankrupted that it had no choice but to merge with England, creating Great Britain. They literally bet the entire country on one roll of the dice and lost everything. 17. It's 1910, and the world is about to end. Halley's Comet is coming, and scientists announce its tail is full of deadly poison gas. The newspapers, loving a good panic, basically print the headline, "Giant space rock is coming to fart on us and we're all gonna die." Naturally, people lose their minds. But for every crisis, there's a guy in a cheap suit with a solution. Con artists popped up everywhere selling anti-comet pills. What did they do? Nothing. They were literally just sugar pills. But people were so terrified of being killed by a cosmic fart that they bought them by the truckload. Some guys even sold anti-comet umbrellas. Because apparently, a little bit of fabric is all you need to defend yourself against the vacuum of space. It was a beautiful, stupid moment when humanity's greatest fear was defeated by the placebo effect. 18. Let me tell you about the crinoline. In the 1800s, it was the peak of women's fashion. It was a giant, rigid cage you wore under your skirt to make you look like a human belle. It was also a death trap. These things were so wide, women had the turning radius of a school bus. They couldn't tell where their own asses ended. They'd casually walk by a fireplace, the skirt would brush against the flame, and whoosh, they'd become a human torch. Thousands of women were incinerated by their own outfits. They'd literally burst into flames at parties. But did this stop the trend? Hell no. They just made the skirts bigger and more flammable. It was a fashion statement that said, "I look amazing, and I am willing to accept the very real possibility that I might spontaneously combust at any moment." 19. History is filled with wars fought for noble reasons. This is not one of them. In 1325, a bunch of soldiers from Modena, Italy, snuck into the rival city of Bologna and stole a wooden bucket from a well. That's it. It was the medieval equivalent of stealing a traffic cone. But Bologna freaked out. They demanded the bucket back. Modena said, "Come and get it." So Bologna declared war. A real war. With swords and horses and thousands of people dying in a field. All because they were salty about a stolen bucket. Modena won the battle, and to this day, that same stupid wooden bucket is sitting in a museum in Modena like it's the Holy Grail. It is the world's most expensive bucket, paid for in blood, stupidity, and sheer Italian rage. 20. The year is 193 AD. The Roman Emperor has just been assassinated. His bodyguards, the elite Praetorian Guard, are trying to decide who should be the next emperor. Then one of them, probably named Vinny, has an idea. Why don't we just sell it? So they did. They put the entire Roman Empire up for auction. Two rich old guys stood outside the army camp, shouting bids like they were at a cattle auction. "I'll give every soldier 20,000 sesterces. I'll give 25,000. The winner was a dude named Didius Julianus. He bought the empire. His glorious reign lasted for about 2 months before another general showed up, said, "This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard," and had him killed. It's proof that even 2,000 years ago, capitalism had a way of getting weird. 21. In 18th century London, if you were bored, you could go to the theater, or you could go to the local insane asylum for some cheap laughs. For just a penny, you could get into the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, aka Bedlam, and treat it like a petting zoo. A human petting zoo. You could walk around, point at the patients, laugh at their delusions, and even poke them with a stick if you were feeling frisky. This was considered a perfectly normal family outing. Hey kids, finish your chores and we'll go watch the lunatics. It was one of London's hottest tourist spots for centuries. It's a good reminder that the good old days were often just one step above a Mad Max movie. 22. In the late 1890s, the German pharmaceutical company Bayer was on a roll. They had just invented a new wonder drug that they claimed was a non-addictive cure for coughs, colds, and general crankiness. They decided to call it heroin because it made patients feel heroic. And who was the target audience for this amazing new product? Children. They were selling pure, uncut heroin as a kid's cough syrup. Let that sink in. They bottled up one of the most destructive substances on the planet and told moms to give it to their toddlers. It's the kind of business decision that's so mind-bogglingly evil, it loops all the way back around to being hilarious. 23. In the summer of 1858, London smelled like the inside of a backed-up porta-potty at a chili festival. For centuries, the city had been dumping all its raw sewage straight into the River Thames. A massive heat wave came along and cooked that river of filth into a weapon of mass nasal destruction. The smell, known as the Great Stink, was so powerful it was causing people to pass out in the streets. In the Houses of Parliament, they were soaking the curtains in chemicals just to get through a meeting without projectile vomiting. It was a smell so profoundly awful that it actually forced the government to finally build a modern sewer system. It took an odor of apocalyptic proportions to get politicians to do their jobs. 24. People take sports seriously, but in 1969, El Salvador and Honduras took it to a whole new level. After a heated 3-game World Cup qualifying soccer match between the two countries, which involved riots and general bad blood, the two nations just went to war, a real war, with tanks and planes and thousands of casualties. It's now called the Football War. They literally started killing each other over the results of a soccer game. It's what would happen if you gave an entire country of angry sports fans an army. It makes you look at that screaming guy and the giant foam finger a little differently, doesn't it? 25. You think your dance moves are killer? In 1518, in the city of Strasbourg, a woman named Frau Trophea walked into the street and just started dancing. No music, no reason, just frantic, non-stop dancing. Within a week, 30 more people had joined her. Within a month, there were hundreds. This wasn't a party, it was a plague. The dancing plague of 1518 was a full-blown epidemic of people who literally could not stop dancing. This wasn't some joyful, expressive dance. It was a grotesque, painful seizure set to a beat that only they could hear. The authorities, in their infinite wisdom, thought the cure was more dancing, so they built a stage and hired musicians. This was the medieval equivalent of telling someone with food poisoning to just eat more of the bad shrimp. Predictably, it made everything worse. People danced until they collapsed from exhaustion, had heart attacks, or their feet just disintegrated. They danced themselves to death. It was the world's first and deadliest flash mob, a terrifying rave that nobody wanted to be at, with a 100% chance of death and zero after-party. 26. In 1835, a newspaper called the New York Sun decided that facts were boring and that their readers were gullible morons. So they published a series of articles claiming that a famous astronomer had built a super telescope and discovered life on the moon. And it wasn't just bacteria. They reported seeing vast forests, oceans, and herds of space bison. But the best part was the inhabitants, Vespertilio Homo, or man-bats, literal flying humanoids who lived in temples. And people ate it up. The newspaper's circulation skyrocketed. Everyone in America was talking about the Moon Men. Rival newspapers weren't even mad that it was a lie. They were mad they didn't think of it first. Scientific groups held serious meetings to discuss how they might communicate with the bat people. The story was a complete fabrication, but for one glorious month, the entire country was united in its belief that the moon was populated by a race of flying naked people. It was the original fake news, and it was a masterpiece. 27. At the turn of the 20th century, humanity discovered a new miracle element, radium. It glowed in the dark. It was mysterious. It had to be good for you, right? It was the goop of its day, but with more gamma radiation. So people started putting it in everything. You could buy radium-laced water that promised to cure all your ailments. There were radium chocolate bars for extra energy, radium toothpaste to give you a brilliant smile, and my personal favorite, radium jock straps too, and I quote, increase virility. Yes, men were willingly microwaving their family jewels in the name of performance enhancement. People were enthusiastically chugging radioactive poison for their health. One famous socialite drank so much of it that when he died, his jaw had literally disintegrated. It's a chilling lesson that just because something is all natural and from the earth, doesn't mean you should put it in your coffee. It took decades for people to realize that the magical, healthy glow was just their bodies slowly being cooked from the inside out. 28. If you think modern startup culture is full of hype, let me introduce you to Gregor McGregor, the OG, fake it till you make it guy. In the 1820s, This Scottish con artist came back to London and announced he was the cacique, or prince, of a beautiful, resource-rich Central American country called Poyes. He didn't just tell people about it. He created an entire marketing campaign. He published books, maps, and even a ridiculously detailed constitution. He described a paradise with fertile soil, gold mines, and a sophisticated capital city just waiting for investors. He sold land deeds, government bonds, and army commissions to hundreds of eager Brits. Then, 2 ships full of colonists set sail for their new home. They arrived to find exactly what was there before: an uninhabitable jungle swamp. There was no city, no gold, nothing. MacGregor had just made the whole country up. He scammed people into buying real estate in his imagination, becoming the Fire Festival founder of the 19th century. 29. In 1814, a brewery in London had a really bad day at the office. A massive vat, holding over 135,000 gallons of fermenting beer, exploded. This triggered a chain reaction, bursting other vats and unleashing a 15-foot-tall tidal wave of dark porter ale that crashed through the streets. The London beer flood wasn't a gentle spill, it was a booze tsunami. It smashed through buildings, flooded basements, and drowned 8 people. One of the victims was a kid who was literally swept away by a river of beer. Imagine the coroner's report. Cause of death: blunt force trauma and a .08 blood alcohol level from absorption alone. The brewery was taken to court, but the judge ruled it was an act of God, which implies that God either really hates cheap beer or just wanted to start a party in the most metal way possible. It remains the only natural disaster in history that probably got a lot of people drunk on its way to killing them. 30. In 1784, the British government, in its eternal quest to tax everything that wasn't nailed down, introduced the brick tax. You paid based on how many bricks you used. It was supposed to be a clever way to tax construction, but they underestimated the sheer, glorious spite of the British people. Builders immediately started making their bricks bigger, and bigger, and bigger. They started using giant, fat bricks the size of cinder blocks to reduce the count and cheat the taxman. This wasn't a subtle protest. This was architectural warfare. The government fired back by putting a legal limit on the size of a brick, like a referee in a boxing match. It was a full-blown arms race between bureaucratic greed and architectural loopholes. It's a beautiful story about how nothing inspires human ingenuity quite like the burning desire to avoid paying your taxes. 31. You think your office politics are bad? In the late 14th century, the Catholic Church had a little disagreement that resulted in there being 2 popes, one in Rome, one in France. Both claimed to be the one true pope, and both excommunicated the other one, basically calling him a fake pope and sending him to hell. Then, in an attempt to solve the problem, a council elected a 3rd pope. But the first 2 refused to quit. So now you had 3 popes. 3 guys, all wearing the big hat, all claiming to have the direct line to God, and all spending their time furiously writing papal bulls about how the other 2 were demon-spawned antichrists. The Pope versus Pope show was the world's most holy and most confusing reality TV show. It lasted for nearly 40 years, doing more damage to the Church's reputation than pretty much anything else in history, and probably leaving God himself wondering who was in charge. 32. In the year 897, Pope Stephen VI had a beef with one of his predecessors, Pope Formosus. The problem was Formosus was already dead and buried. This did not deter Stephen. He ordered Formosus's 9-month-old corpse to be dug up, dressed in full papal robes, and propped up on a throne to stand trial. This was the Cadaver Synod. Stephen screamed accusations at the rotting corpse, which had a lawyer appointed to speak on its behalf, who presumably had the easiest and weirdest day of his career. Unsurprisingly, the dead pope lost the case. He was found guilty, his papacy was declared invalid, the 3 fingers he used for blessings were hacked off, and his body was thrown into the river. This wasn't just holding a grudge. This was taking your grudge out to a fancy dinner, then stabbing it with a fork. It was a level of petty vindictiveness so extreme, it's not even human anymore. It's art. 33. Long before it was the king of condiments, ketchup was sold as a medicine. In the 1830s, an Ohio physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett declared that tomatoes could cure everything from diarrhea to indigestion. He created a recipe for tomato ketchup and concentrated it into pill form. These ketchup pills became a national sensation. Other companies jumped on the bandwagon, creating their own snake oil versions that promised to cure scurvy and mend broken bones. For a brief, shining moment in American history, people thought the cure for all their ills was a concentrated glob of tomato goop. And in a way, they weren't entirely wrong. It might not cure disease, but it can definitely cure a bland, sad hamburger, and sometimes that's the only miracle you really need. It was the moment America realized that sometimes the best medicine is just making your food less boring. So, I think we can all agree humanity didn't survive thanks to intelligence, just blind, baffling, stupid luck. And here's my challenge to you. Drop one historical event in the comments that proves me wrong. Go on, I'll wait. Meanwhile, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more undeniable evidence that the past was nothing short of a full-blown circus.